So, probably should have done this at the beginning, but just to tell you a little bit about who we are, what we are. We're the stock transfer landlord for Torvine. So Torvine Council will transfer its 8,054 homes to Bronavon Community Housing on the 31st of March, if the Welsh Assembly Government gets its process completed by then. 400 plus staff, £35 million per year investment programme and a 25 million revenue budget. So we're the biggest public service organisation. We have the biggest capital programme of any public service organisation in Torvine over the next 5 years, bigger than the health service, bigger than the local government, and so we are a major regeneration partner in the borough, as we should be. And as I say, we're our own model. We're not purporting to be anybody else's model or necessarily the same or better than anybody else. Oops, we are. So what did tenants tell us? They told us some very interesting things. And this was what council tenants in Torvine were telling us, and this may not be what your tenants would tell you, but nevertheless they raised some interesting challenges for the housing association and registered social landlord movement. First, we do not under any circumstances want to be a housing association because they are undemocratic. That's what they were saying, rightly or wrongly. We don't want a name with homes in it, like barracks or residential homes. Sheltered housing tenants, no way do we want to be part of an organisation with the name homes, because people will think we're in residential care. That was 1,000 of our tenants saying that. And the others were saying, well, barracks are called barracks homes. We don't want to be barracks homes. We want to be housing. Right or wrong? That's what they said. So that's what they got. Democratic accountability was really important to people. And that was obviously in the context that they were tenants of a council with democratically elected councillors, moving to a third sector body, a social enterprise, where the issue around accountability became less clear. So that was the context. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the same for existing organisations, but nevertheless, the whole issue of democratic accountability was really important to them. They wanted greater influence and involvement over things that matter, not just the trivia around the edges, but actually the things that matter. They don't want to be customers or residents. They want to be tenants. That's very, again, the trend is towards calling everybody customers. It's a very convenient word if you're in the jargon business, because it sort of loosely includes leaseholders and residents and other people who we don't have to define. But actually, they didn't want to be called customers. So customers is a banned word in Bronavon. Nor do they want to be called residents. Right. Again, I made this point, want collective involvement and influence, not the consumerist model. So they didn't want the sort of, let's look at the rights of individuals, wanted to be involved collectively, making joint decisions with a collective power and influence rather than attempts at individual. They wanted community involvement and not just tenant involvement. So the tenant participation is again not a phrase we use in Bronavon. We use community involvement because we're not into tenant participation as a narrow concept. We're into community involvement. And so, because actually they're part of the communities, they're not just tenants having a relationship with their landlord, the whole community has a relationship will have a relationship with Bronavon, particularly in a stock transfer situation as ours, where we will get vast quantities of land around the communities because they used to be housing estates, and a lot of people have bought under right to buy, but nevertheless there's a lot of communal land around that we will become the owner of. Wanted a community investment agency, not just a housing one. So they're not interested in just a housing landlord, they're interested in a community investment agency, creating jobs, learning and promoting learning, training and opportunities, a community enterprise, and a focus on people, not bricks and mortar. Again, something that they wanted us to steer clear of. So no pictures of bricks and mortar in our publicity material, you'll find pictures of people. They wanted a public service organisation. And that's an interesting question for the sector, I think. Are we public service organisations or not? Well, Bronavon is. We said in our values we're proud to be a social enterprise, but it's a public service organisation. It's not a public sector organisation, it's a public service organisation. And it's difficult to see how we could really see ourselves as anything else, delivering to 8,000 tenants, 1,000 extra leaseholders, plus a huge number of other people. And they wanted social enterprise. So, democratic accountability is one of our fundamental aims. So one of them is delivering housing, high quality housing and good homes, but actually democratic accountability is in there at the top. because it was an absolutely key point for tenants that our accountability to them was an important factor in how we set up Bronavon. So we've got the tenant board members, as many organisations have. Ours are elected by all the tenants. We've just had a vote recently where 3,000 tenants voted for a tenant board member on a single transferable vote. So we had a major exercise with 8,000 people voting, opportunity to vote, of whom 3,000 plus did. So elections, that's nothing particularly special necessarily, as many other people may do that way as well. But what we don't have is just the members electing the tenant board. That's, because that would involve 20 or 30 people at an annual general meeting electing the tenant board members. That isn't going to happen in Bronavon. We have a membership committee, which is pretty unique probably in Wales. I don't think so, but Preston Gateway in England had that, where the members, the 387 members, as well as actually have a separate membership committee which scrutinises all the work of the board. So every board agenda goes to those membership committee members. They can call in issues in the same way that a council scrutiny committee can call issues in. They can ask me questions about proposed policies. They can express a view about them before they go before the board, and holding the board to account, and the officer called to some extent to account too. So they have the opportunity, and they can also set up their own reviews of particular policies or processes. So say they're similar to a council scrutiny committee, but they're operating in parallel with the membership. And our board meetings are open to the public, and we've had more people and members of the public at our board meetings than most council meetings have, interestingly. I think the maximum was about 7 on one occasion. So people are attending. I mean, most of them are tenants, and most of the people are involved as members of the organisation, but we've had a few who aren't, who come along to complain about an issue and so on. So that's encouraging, and we're certainly going to publicise our meetings more effectively. We haven't publicised them to a great extent yet. The board papers are published. Obviously there are confidential issues, but actually most of the business we do isn't confidential. We're talking about policies, and the policies are public policies. No real reason why people couldn't be present at the board discussion to hear what's being said in the same way that they would be in any other public sector organisation discussing the same policies themselves. The members and staff interviewed, as I think Ian said, I had 7.5 hours of interviews. I was interviewed by members for a couple of hours. I've interviewed by staff for a couple of hours, as well as being interviewed by the board for a couple of hours. And they sat in on the board interviews. And I think that was it was a 3-party appointment process, really. And this wasn't just a superficial appointment process. Hours were spent then making sure that the feedback from the members and the staff were built into the discussions on the board. Their feedback from the board interviews was built in before any decisions were made. And actually, it definitely influenced the process. I couldn't say that for my post because I wasn't at the secret discussions that took place afterwards. But certainly when we were recruiting the rest of the management team, they really did make a difference in terms of the outcome of the appointments. The Council Scrutiny Committee, we've signed up to be willing to go in front of the Council Scrutiny Committee to account for our performance. So we are proud to be the fact that we are, although we're an independent social enterprise, we are a public service organisation and therefore ought to be accountable to the locally elected representatives. In the same way I think the police and the health service should be. But we are just another body that ought to be accountable in that way.